Fascism is a word we hear often, but how many of us truly understand what it means? You may be surprised to know that fascism isn't just a thing of the past, it's alive and well in parts of the world today. In fact, a 2021 report found that far-right extremist groups have grown by 250% in the past decade alone. That's a shocking number, isn't it? What if I told you that fascism isn't just about dictators and war? It's a dangerous, all-encompassing ideology that manipulates the very core of society. It's about power, fear, and control. In this video, we'll break down the shocking rise of fascism, how it spreads, and why it's not just history repeating itself. We'll look at the chilling tactics that fascists use to gain power, and how they still echo in today's politics. From the rise of Mussolini and Hitler to the growth of far-right movements today, fascism is a global threat. But how does it really work? Why does it keep reappearing? Stick around as we dive deep into its strategies, its appeal, and the eerie signs that fascism is making a comeback. You won't want to miss this eye-opening journey into one of the most dangerous ideologies of our time. Chapter 1: The Rise of a Dangerous Ideology. What is fascism? Fascism is often misunderstood, but its history is as dark as it is important. It emerged in Europe during the early 20th century, notably in Italy under Benito Mussolini and in Germany with Adolf Hitler. Fascism thrives on intense nationalism, dictatorial power, and the rejection of democratic institutions. Unlike communism or liberal democracy, fascism believes that society is best governed by a strong, central leader who enforces order above all else. Mussolini's famous phrase, "everything in the state, nothing outside the state," encapsulates fascism's totalitarian nature. This means that the state controls every aspect of life, from politics to culture. Under fascism, there's little room for individual freedom. Those who oppose the regime are quickly silenced, often violently. Another key feature of fascism is its focus on militarism and war. Fascist regimes view military conquest as essential to the state's strength. This is why the Nazi regime aggressively expanded across Europe, while Mussolini dreamed of creating a new Roman Empire. In both cases, they justified violence as a way to protect the nation's future. Fascism also seeks to consolidate power by creating a singular national identity. Minorities, intellectuals, and political dissidents are often scapegoated to build unity among the majority. For example, the Nazi regime's targeting of Jewish people led to the horrors of the Holocaust. While fascism was defeated in World War II, its principles never fully disappeared. Its allure still resonates with certain political movements around the world today. In fact, recent data from the Anti-Defamation League shows an increase in far-right extremist groups in Europe and North America. Chapter 2: The Dark Charisma. How fascists capture the masses. A key element of fascism's rise is the charismatic leader. Fascist leaders, like Mussolini and Hitler, weren't just political figures, they were seen as saviors. They presented themselves as the only ones capable of restoring the nation's glory. Hitler, for instance, was skilled at manipulating public emotion, turning people's fears and frustrations into support for his cause. Propaganda played a crucial role in this manipulation. The use of mass rallies, such as the Nuremberg rallies in Nazi Germany, made people feel part of something bigger. The dramatic speeches and giant swastika banners created an overwhelming atmosphere of unity. Fascists also used simple, repetitive slogans to drive their messages home. For example, Hitler's "Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer," one people, one empire, one leader, gave Germans a clear and catchy idea of what they were fighting for. Fascists were experts at using modern technology to spread their messages. Mussolini, often called Il Duce, the leader, was one of the first to master radio as a means of communication. He broadcast his speeches to millions, making his voice synonymous with Italian power. Hitler also recognized the importance of cinema and film, using it to glorify his image and spread Nazi ideology. Fascist leaders understood the power of emotions and used them to create a sense of crisis. They portrayed themselves as the only solution to national decay. For example, when Mussolini rose to power in Italy, he promised to end the chaos of the post-World War I period. His message, "Believe, obey, fight," resonated deeply with Italians disillusioned by economic struggles. Moreover, fascism often presents itself as a movement for the common man, against the elites. Mussolini, despite his elitist background, cultivated an image as a champion of workers. By using class resentment, he gained the loyalty of many Italians who felt left behind. Fascism's appeal is often strongest in times of crisis, where people feel that their country is in danger. Economic instability, like the Great Depression, can fuel the rise of fascist leaders. A 2018 study by the Pew Research Center found that support for far-right parties grew in Europe during periods of economic downturn, showing how effective this strategy is today. Chapter 3: Fascist Economies, Control, Corporations, and Corruption. Fascism doesn't follow the rules of traditional capitalism or socialism. Instead, it creates a unique economic system where the state exerts control over the economy, while still allowing private ownership, under strict regulation. Mussolini called this system corporatism. In practice, this meant that industries were organized into state-approved corporations that could influence economic policies. In fascist economies, the government decides which businesses succeed and which ones fail. This often results in powerful monopolies controlled by a few elite players who are closely aligned with the state. Fascist Italy, for instance, saw the rise of huge corporations like Fiat, which had close ties to Mussolini's regime. These companies benefited from favorable state policies and were expected to support the regime in return. The state's control over the economy also extends to labor. Mussolini dissolved trade unions and replaced them with government-run labor organizations. These organizations were designed to control workers, limit strikes, and keep the working class in line. In Nazi Germany, the situation was similar. The state-controlled German Labor Front became the only union allowed, further centralizing power. Fascist regimes also often rely on militarization of the economy. Under Hitler, German industries were heavily invested in military production. Companies like Volkswagen, which was created to produce the people's car, later became key suppliers to the Nazi war machine. This blending of business and military interests led to a system that was highly profitable for the elite but deeply exploitative for the workers. One of the most troubling aspects of fascist economies is the corruption they breed. The close ties between the government and big business often lead to cronyism and favoritism. In fascist Italy, Mussolini's government was notorious for awarding lucrative contracts to friends and allies. These relationships allowed the elite to get rich at the expense of the general population. Fascist regimes also often rely on propaganda to mask the failures of their economic systems. When the economy falters or people face hardship, fascist leaders tend to blame external enemies or internal traitors. In Nazi Germany, the regime's economic struggles were often blamed on Jews and communists, further fueling discrimination and violence. If you find this interesting, make sure to subscribe for more insights into how fascism continues to influence the world today. Chapter 4: Fascism and Nationalism, the Dangerous Love Affair. At the core of fascism is an intense and often dangerous nationalism. Fascists believe that the nation is supreme and must be preserved at all costs. This type of nationalism is not about celebrating diversity or inclusion, it's about creating a homogeneous national identity. For fascists, unity is achieved through exclusion. Minorities, immigrants, and anyone who doesn't fit the national mold are seen as a threat. Hitler's Nazi ideology was heavily based on the idea of racial purity. He promoted the idea that the Aryan race was superior and that non-Aryans were a danger to society. This thinking led to the systematic persecution of Jews, Romani people, disabled individuals, and other minorities. The slogan, Deutschland über alles, Germany above all, became a rallying cry for those who believed their nation should dominate all others. Fascists often use national symbols, like flags and anthems, to evoke a sense of pride and belonging. In Mussolini's Italy, the fascist symbol of the fasces, a bundle of rods tied together, was meant to signify strength through unity. The swastika in Nazi Germany became a symbol of the power of the Aryan race, fueling nationalist pride while also promoting hatred and division. But nationalism in fascist regimes doesn't just create pride, it also creates fear. Fascists often play on the anxieties of people who feel their country is being taken over by foreigners or by internal enemies. In the 1930s, Mussolini capitalized on the fear of Italy's decline after World War I, claiming that only a strong nationalist government could restore the nation's former glory. A 2019 Pew Research Center survey revealed that nearly 60% of people in Europe believed that immigration would undermine their national culture, a sentiment that far-right nationalist groups use to gain power today. The fascist obsession with nationalism often leads to aggression toward other nations. Mussolini's dreams of reviving the Roman Empire drove his military campaigns in Africa, while Hitler's desire for Lebensraum, living space, in Eastern Europe led to the invasion of neighboring countries. This mindset has real-world consequences. Fascist aggression often sparks wars, as history has painfully shown. Nationalism is a powerful tool in fascist ideology. By focusing on the purity and superiority of the nation, fascists manipulate emotions, turning fear into hatred and unity into division. This dangerous blend can lead to tragic outcomes, as fascist leaders have shown time and again. Chapter 5, The Fascist Playbook, Tactics for Seizing Power. Fascists don't just seize power by chance, they use a clear set of strategies to climb to the top. One of the most effective tactics is exploiting social and economic unrest. When people feel hopeless or disenfranchised, they are more likely to turn to extreme solutions. Hitler took advantage of the post-World War I economic turmoil in Germany, promising to restore the country's former glory while blaming Jews and communists for its downfall. In the 1930s, unemployment was at an all-time high in Germany, with over 6 million people out of work. Hitler's promises of jobs and a better future resonated deeply with the suffering population. Violence is another key element of fascist tactics. Mussolini's black shirts and Hitler's brown shirts were paramilitary groups that used force to intimidate political opponents and disrupt opposition rallies. These groups created an atmosphere of fear, making it harder for rival parties to organize or speak out. Fascists also used these groups to destroy democratic institutions and pave the way for dictatorship. Fascist leaders also know how to manipulate public opinion through propaganda. Goebbels, the Nazi propaganda minister, was a master of media manipulation. He understood that control over the media allowed the regime to control the narrative. He used radio broadcasts, films, and newspapers to spread Nazi ideology. Mussolini used similar tactics, ensuring that only his message reached the Italian public. One key tactic is the cult of personality, where the leader is glorified as a near-divine figure. Mussolini was often portrayed as Il Duce, or the leader who would guide Italy to greatness. Hitler was worshipped as the Führer, the savior of the German people. This personal cult becomes a vital tool in maintaining loyalty and suppressing dissent. A crucial strategy for fascists is the gradual erosion of democracy. Mussolini didn't immediately establish a dictatorship, he slowly undermined Italy's democratic institutions until he had enough power to take full control. Hitler followed a similar path. After the Reichstag fire in 1933, he convinced President Hindenburg to pass the Reichstag fire decree, which suspended civil liberties and gave Hitler almost unlimited power. This moment marked the beginning of the end for Germany's democracy. The use of legal measures is another key tactic. Mussolini's March on Rome in 1922 led to him being appointed as prime minister, even though his party didn't win a majority. Once in power, he used legal means to suppress opposition and consolidate his position. Hitler used the Enabling Act of 1933 to give himself dictatorial powers, effectively ending the Weimar Republic's fragile democracy. Fascists also employ the tactic of dividing and conquering. By creating internal divisions within society, whether through class, race, or religion, they can weaken opposition and strengthen their control. This tactic has been used in various forms throughout history, including the division of the German population into Aryans and non-Aryans under Nazi rule. Fascism thrives on fear and chaos. By creating an atmosphere of crisis, fascists make people believe that only the leader can save the nation. This crisis mentality drives people to abandon democratic values in favor of authoritarian rule, often with disastrous results. Chapter 6, Fascism Today. Is it making a comeback? Fascism may have been defeated in the 20th century, but some argue that it's making a disturbing comeback in the 21st century. Around the world, we are seeing the rise of far-right movements that borrow from fascist ideologies. In Hungary, Prime Minister Viktor Orban has been accused of undermining democratic institutions and consolidating power in a way reminiscent of fascist leaders. In Poland, the ruling Law and Justice Party has taken similar steps, pushing back against civil liberties and eroding judicial independence. In the United States, far-right groups like the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers have grown in prominence, fueled by nationalist and authoritarian rhetoric. A 2020 study by the Southern Poverty Law Center showed a significant rise in far-right extremist groups in the US, particularly after the election of Donald Trump in 2016. Many of these groups use similar tactics to fascist movements of the past: propaganda, fear-mongering, and violence to undermine democracy. Fascism's modern appeal is largely fueled by discontent with globalization and economic inequality. As more people feel left behind by globalization, they are drawn to nationalist and anti-immigrant rhetoric. In Brazil, President Jair Bolsonaro's rise to power echoed many of the same tactics used by fascists, including anti-immigrant sentiment, appeals to nationalism, and disdain for democratic norms. Social media has become a key tool for spreading far-right ideas. Platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube allow extremist groups to organize and recruit followers in ways that were previously impossible. In a 2021 report, the Institute for Strategic Dialogue found that far-right groups are increasingly using social media to spread fascist propaganda, recruit new members, and coordinate violent actions. But is this the return of fascism? It's hard to say. While the world today is very different from the 1930s, many of the tactics used by fascists, manipulating public opinion, promoting fear, and undermining democracy, are still very much in play. The danger is that, just as in the past, people may be willing to trade freedom for the promise of security and national greatness. Subscribe for more on how these dangerous movements are shaping today's politics, and what we can do to protect democracy.